The silent departure. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport of her cargo vessel, the Meridian Star, watching the massive structure of Commerce Station Alpha drift past. The station was a marvel of engineering, a floating city where 100 different species conducted business across the galaxy. Lights flickered in countless windows, ships came and went like insects around a hive, and somewhere deep inside, the Interstellar Commerce Guild made decisions that affected trillions of lives. Elena had been coming to this station for 15 years. She had watched it grow, had helped build parts of it with her own hands during the early expansion. She knew every docking bay, every market corridor, every shortcut through the maintenance tunnels. This place had been her second home. Today would be her last visit. She turned away from the viewport and walked through the cargo bay. Her crew was busy securing the final shipment, a load of medical supplies destined for a mining colony in the outer reaches. It was routine work, the kind of unglamorous hauling that kept the galaxy running. Human merchant fleets had been doing this work for decades, moving goods that no one else wanted to transport because the profit margins were too thin or the destinations too remote. Her first officer, James Okonkwo, met her at the cargo bay entrance. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that came from 30 years in space. He held a data tablet and his expression was troubled. "The Guild is denying our docking request for the return trip," he said quietly. "They claim our certification paperwork is incomplete." Elena took the tablet and scrolled through the messages. The Guild's response was cold and bureaucratic. Human vessels were being held to new standards, standards that had been implemented just 3 days ago without any notice to the affected parties. The certification they demanded would take weeks to obtain and cost thousands of credits. "This is the 5th time this month," James said. "They are making it impossible for us to operate." Elena knew he was right. Over the past year, the Guild had been steadily increasing restrictions on human merchants. New fees appeared without explanation. Docking priorities were always given to other species. Trade routes that humans had pioneered were suddenly open to competitors who undercut them with Guild subsidies. When human captains complained, they were told to file formal grievances that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. The Guild leadership made no secret of their attitude. Humans were newcomers, barely a century in space, while some Guild members had been navigating the stars for 10,000 years. Humanity's role was to serve, to handle the work that others found beneath them, and to be grateful for whatever scraps were thrown their way. "Finish loading," Elena said, handing back the tablet. "We will complete this delivery. Then we are going home." James looked at her sharply. "Oh, you mean Earth?" Elena nodded. She had been thinking about this for months, ever since the incident at Kelver Station. A human supply ship had been accused of carrying contraband. The evidence was flimsy, clearly fabricated, but the Guild had seized the vessel anyway. The captain and crew spent 3 months in detention before the charges were quietly dropped. No apology was offered. No compensation was paid. The ship was returned damaged and stripped of its cargo. The message had been clear. Humans had no real standing in the Guild. They could be accused, punished, and discarded without consequence. "Send a message to Director Webb," Elena said. "Tell him I recommend full withdrawal. We are done here." On Earth, in the headquarters of the Human Commerce Directorate, Marcus Webb read Elena's message 3 times. He was an older man, gray-haired and distinguished, who had spent his entire career building humanity's place in galactic trade. He had negotiated treaties, established trade routes, and convinced reluctant alien governments to give human merchants a chance. Now he was being asked to throw it all away. He called an emergency meeting of the Directorate Council. Representatives from every major human trading company gathered in the conference room. They came in person or via hologram from across human space. The mood was tense. Marcus displayed Elena's message for everyone to see. Then he pulled up similar reports from dozens of other captains. The pattern was undeniable. Human merchants were being systematically marginalized, pushed out of profitable routes, burdened with impossible regulations. "They do not want us there," Marcus said quietly. "They have made that abundantly clear. So I propose we give them exactly what they want. We leave." There was silence. Then objections erupted from around the table. "We have contracts," one director protested. "Obligations. Investments worth billions. Which mean nothing if they can seize our ships on fabricated charges," another director countered. "We are not operating on a level playing field. We are operating at their mercy." The debate raged for 2 hours. Some argued for staying, for fighting through the legal channels, for proving humanity's worth. Others argued that dignity mattered more than profit, that constantly accepting disrespect was destroying human morale. Marcus listened to it all. Then he called for a vote. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. Humanity would withdraw from guild space. Every human merchant vessel, every trading post, every commercial operation would be closed and brought home. They would do it quietly, professionally, without drama or angry declarations. They would simply leave. The withdrawal began within 48 hours. Marcus sent encrypted messages to every human captain, every station manager, every company representative in guild space. The instructions were simple and clear. Fulfill your current contracts, then come home. Captain Elena Vasquez delivered her medical supplies to the mining colony. The colonists were grateful, as they always were. Most of them were not even guild members, just independent settlers trying to survive on a harsh world. They relied on human merchants because no one else would make the long journey to bring them what they needed. "Thank you, Captain," the colony administrator said as the last crate was unloaded. "Will we see you next month?" Elena hesitated. She wanted to tell him the truth, that he would need to find other suppliers, that human ships would not be coming anymore. But her orders were clear. No explanations. No arguments. "Just leave. We will see," she said instead. "Take care of yourselves." The Meridian Star departed the colony and set course for Earth. Across the galaxy, hundreds of other human ships were doing the same. They completed their final deliveries, closed their accounts, and departed guild space. Human trading posts shut down. The facilities were left clean and secure, with all local staff given generous severance packages. No one was abandoned. No one was left in crisis. Humans took care of their obligations even as they walked away. Within 2 weeks, the human commercial presence in guild space had vanished. At Commerce Station Alpha, Guild Administrator Vex noticed the humans were gone. He was a Tellurian, a species known for their business acumen and their elaborate cranial ridges that changed color with their moods. Right now his ridges were a satisfied blue. "The humans have finally accepted their place," he told his assistant. "Or perhaps they have simply given up. Either way, the problem has resolved itself." His assistant, a younger Tellurian named Kess, looked uncertain. "Should we not investigate? They operated many essential routes." "Essential?" Vex laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Nothing the humans did was essential. They were couriers, nothing more. Others will fill the gaps they have left." Kess did not argue, but he made a note to monitor the situation. Something about the way the humans had left bothered him. There had been no protests, no demands, no emotional outbursts. They had simply vanished like smoke and wind. That silence felt ominous. On Earth, Elena Vasquez stood in Marcus Webb's office and looked at a star map of guild space. Red markers showed where human operations had been. There were hundreds of them, scattered across dozens of sectors. "All gone now," Marcus said quietly. 70 years of work. Ended in 2 weeks. Elena studied the map. She did not feel triumphant or vindicated. She felt tired and sad. She had loved the work, loved the challenge of navigating between stars, loved meeting new species and seeing strange worlds. But she had not loved being treated like she was worthless. "Did we make the right choice?" she asked. Marcus looked at her. "Time will tell. But I know this much. We could not continue as we were. Humans are not made to accept contempt as the price of doing business." "What happens now?" "Now we wait," Marcus said. "We see if the guild notices what they have lost. We see if they understand that humans were doing more than they realized. And if they do not, then we build something better here at home," Marcus said. "We do not need the guild to thrive. We never did." Elena nodded slowly. She thought about all the captains she knew, all the crews who had given years of their lives to guild trade. They would adapt. Humans always did. They would find new purposes, new challenges, new ways to prove their worth. The galaxy might not appreciate humanity, but humanity would endure regardless. As she left Marcus's office, Elena paused at a window overlooking the spaceport. Ships were arriving every day now, human vessels returning from every corner of guild space. Crews reunited with families. Captains filed their final reports. The great withdrawal continued with quiet efficiency. No one knew it yet, but something fundamental had shifted in the galaxy. A species had been pushed too far and had chosen dignity over acceptance. The consequences of that choice were only beginning to unfold. In guild space, in the markets and shipping lanes and trade stations, small problems were starting to appear. Supply deliveries were delayed. Maintenance schedules were disrupted. Communications had strange gaps. Nothing catastrophic yet, just little inefficiencies that made operations slightly harder. Administrator Vex noticed none of this. He was too busy congratulating himself on solving the human problem. His ridges glowed with satisfied blue light as he reviewed the quarterly reports. He did not notice that certain numbers were starting to trend in wrong directions. He did not see the warnings buried in the data. He did not understand that the galaxy's invisible support system had just walked away. The guild would learn. But learning would cost them dearly. Humanity had left without a sound. The silence that followed would be deafening. The unraveling. 3 months had passed since the last human vessel departed guild space. Administrator Vex sat in his office at Commerce Station Alpha, staring at reports that made no sense. Supply chain efficiency had dropped by 40%. Station maintenance costs had tripled. Communication relays were failing at unprecedented rates. His cranial ridges flickered between confused yellow and angry red. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, scrolling through the data again. "These systems have operated flawlessly for decades." His assistant Kess entered carrying another tablet loaded with complaints. "Sir, we have 17 emergency requests from mining colonies in the outer reaches. They are running out of essential supplies. Medical equipment, food synthesizers, power cells. Then dispatch supply ships," Vex snapped. "We have," Kess said carefully. "But the routes are complicated." The human merchants had detailed knowledge of navigation hazards, optimal timing windows and local conditions. "Our pilots are having difficulties." Vex dismissed this with a wave. "They will adapt. Send experienced crews." "We did," Kess said quietly. 3 ships have turned back already. The routes are more dangerous than our records indicated. 2 captains are demanding hazard pay increases of 300%. Vex felt his ridges darken to frustrated purple. This was absurd. Humans had been running those routes for years without complaint, hauling cargo to worthless colonies that barely generated profit. Now guild pilots were acting like it was impossible? Across guild space, similar problems were multiplying. On Trading Hub Meridian, the central computer system began experiencing cascade failures. Technicians rushed to fix each problem only to discover 3 more. The system architecture was decades old, a patchwork of different technologies that had been integrated over centuries. A human engineer named Sarah Chen had maintained it. She had spent 12 years learning every quirk and workaround, documenting nothing because no one had ever asked her to. She had made it all work through intuition and experience. Now she was gone and the system was dying. The head technician, a Vraxian named Tor, stared at the code scrolling across his screens. Half of it made no sense. There were custom patches and bypass protocols that seemed to violate basic programming logic, yet somehow kept everything running. How did the human do this? Tor asked his team. No one had an answer. They had never paid attention to Sarah's work. She was just a human technician, someone who fixed things quietly while the important Vraxians handled strategic planning. Now Tor understood that Sarah had been the only thing standing between a functional system and total collapse. He tried to reach her, sent messages to Earth requesting her consultation. The messages went unanswered. Sarah was home now, working on developing Earth's own infrastructure. She had no interest in helping those who had never valued her expertise. On Commerce Station Alpha, Administrator Vex called an emergency meeting of sector managers. The conference room was crowded with representatives from a dozen species, all looking frustrated and confused. "Report," Vex commanded. The reports painted a grim picture. Trade routes were in chaos. Small colonies were facing shortages. Communication networks were unreliable. Maintenance backlogs were growing exponentially. Insurance costs for merchant vessels had quadrupled because accident rates were climbing. One manager, a methodical Quillan named Sark, presented the most disturbing analysis. "I have been studying human commercial activities over the past 70 years, Sark said in his clicking, precise voice. "I have identified over 6,000 distinct services and functions that humans provided." Vex felt his ridges pale. 6,000? That is impossible. They were just cargo haulers. "That is what we assumed," Sark said. "But the data shows otherwise. Humans were not simply transporting goods. They were maintaining infrastructure we did not know needed maintenance. They were solving problems we did not know existed. They were filling gaps in our systems that we had never noticed because they were already filled." Sark displayed a holographic chart. It showed the intricate web of human activities across guild space. Most of it had been invisible, untracked, unreported. Humans fixed broken equipment during routine stops. They shared navigation data freely with other species. They trained local workers. They provided emergency assistance without filing for reimbursement. They did thousands of small things that kept the machinery of galactic commerce running smoothly. All of it was gone now. They did all this for free? Another manager asked, sounding shocked. Most of it, Sark confirmed. They considered it part of normal operations. Good business practice. Building relationships. Vex stood abruptly. Then we will hire contractors to replace these functions. Problem solved. Sark's antennae drooped skeptically. Sir, I have calculated the cost of replacing human services with commercial contracts. The annual expense would exceed 12 trillion credits. The room fell silent. That was more than the guild's entire discretionary budget. That cannot be right, Vex said weakly. I have checked my calculations 17 times, Sark said. The humans were subsidizing guild operations on a massive scale. They were not charging for most of their services. They were simply doing what they believed was correct. Vex sat down slowly. His ridges cycled through colors too quickly to follow. This was a disaster. The guild could not afford to replace what humanity had provided. But without those services, guild commerce was slowly grinding to a halt. On Kelver Station, the facility where a human ship had been falsely accused of smuggling, Chief of Security Roland faced a crisis. The station's life support system was malfunctioning. Oxygen recyclers were operating at 60% efficiency. Carbon dioxide was building up in residential sectors. People were getting sick. The technicians could not fix it. The system was too old, too complex. They needed someone who understood the outdated technology. Roland remembered that a human engineer, Daniel Torres, had once volunteered to upgrade their life support during a scheduled maintenance period. Roland had rejected the offer, insulted that a human would presume to improve Kelvorian technology. Now Roland desperately needed Daniel's expertise. He sent multiple messages to Earth, offering generous payment for consultation. The messages were ignored. Roland was forced to evacuate 3 residential levels. Hundreds of families had to relocate. The station's population was furious. They demanded answers. Why had maintenance been neglected? Why were the technicians incompetent? The truth was painful. Maintenance had not been neglected. A human had been quietly maintaining it for years, fixing problems before they became critical. No one had noticed because everything just worked. Now that human was gone and the systems were failing, Roland stood in the empty residential corridor and felt something he had rarely experienced in his long career. Shame. 4 months after humanity's departure, the crisis reached a breaking point. A passenger liner carrying 3,000 civilians experienced engine failure in a remote sector. The ship sent distress calls across all frequencies. In the old days, human merchant vessels would have responded immediately. They monitored distress frequencies constantly and considered rescue a moral obligation. Several human ships had been within range of almost any emergency in guild space. Now there were no human ships to respond. Guild rescue services existed, but they were underfunded and understaffed. The nearest guild vessel was 18 hours away. The passenger liner had 14 hours of life support remaining. Administrator Vex watched the crisis unfold from Commerce Station Alpha. His office was filled with officials, all shouting suggestions and accusations. His ridges were a mottled gray, the color of deep stress. Can we reach the humans? Someone asked. Request emergency assistance? Vex had been avoiding this moment, but he could no longer deny reality. Send the message, he said quietly. The message went to Earth, to the Human Commerce Directorate. It was brief and desperate. 3,000 lives at risk. Requesting immediate assistance. Will provide compensation. The response came within an hour. It was not from Marcus Webb. It was from Captain Elena Vasquez. Meridian Star is 30 minutes from the liner, the message read. We are on a private cargo run to an Earth colony. We will divert to assist. Expect rescue completion within 2 hours. Vex felt relief wash over him. Then confusion. You are in guild space? But all human commercial operations withdrew. Private vessel Elena's reply came back. We operate under Earth registry now, not guild authority. We go where we choose. The Meridian Star reached the passenger liner with time to spare. Elena's crew worked efficiently, transferring the passengers to safety and engineering a temporary repair to the liner's engines. Within 3 hours the crisis was over. The rescued passengers sent messages of gratitude. Many of them were species that had dismissed humans as inferior. Now they owed their lives to human compassion. Elena transmitted one final message before departing. This is what humans do. We help because it is right. Not because we are ordered. Not because we are paid. Because we choose to. Perhaps the guild should have noticed that before deciding we were worthless. Then the Meridian Star jumped to hyperspace and was gone. On Commerce Station Alpha, Administrator Vex sat alone in his darkened office. The rescued liner was heading to port. The passengers were safe. The crisis had been resolved. But nothing was truly resolved. The fundamental problem remained. The guild had built its prosperity on a foundation of human labor and goodwill without ever acknowledging the debt. Now that foundation was gone and everything was crumbling. Vex accessed his private terminal and pulled up humanity's commercial records. He spent hours reading through them, seeing patterns he had been blind to before. Humans had been the glue holding the guild together. Their work ethic, their innovation, their willingness to help without expecting reward. All of it had been dismissed as naive enthusiasm from a young species. The guild had not just lost merchants. They had lost their conscience. Vex's ridges settled into a deep, remorseful blue. He knew what had to be done. It would be humiliating. It would require the guild to admit fault, something they had not done in 1,000 years. But there was no alternative. He composed a message to the Guild High Council. It was the most difficult message he had ever written. In it, he detailed the crisis, showed the data, and made a recommendation that would have seemed impossible 4 months ago. We must apologize to humanity. We must request their return. And we must do so with genuine humility because we need them far more than they need us. The High Council met in emergency session. They reviewed the evidence. They argued and debated and tried to find alternatives. But in the end, they reached the same conclusion as Vex. A delegation was prepared. It would travel to Earth and request an audience with human leadership. The delegation members were chosen carefully. They had to be high-ranking enough to demonstrate sincerity, but humble enough to accept whatever terms humanity demanded. Administrator Vex volunteered to lead the delegation. His ridges had turned a permanent shade of ashamed purple. He had been wrong about humanity. Catastrophically wrong. He would spend the rest of his career trying to make amends. The guild ship departed for Earth carrying representatives who finally understood what they had lost. They hoped humanity would listen. They hoped forgiveness was possible. But they had no certainty. Humans had walked away with dignity intact. They had no reason to return to a place that had never respected them. The delegation could only offer truth and hope it was enough. On Earth, Marcus Webb received word of the approaching guild vessel. He called Elena Vasquez to his office. Together they watched the ship's progress on the tracking monitors. They are coming to apologize, Marcus said. Elena nodded. Do we accept? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. That depends on what they have learned. If they understand that respect cannot be negotiated, that dignity is not for sale, then perhaps we can find a way forward. And if they have not learned? Then they will leave empty-handed, Marcus said firmly. Humanity does not need the guild's approval to thrive. We never did. Elena smiled slightly. She thought about all the human crews working in human space now, building trade networks between Earth colonies, creating something new and independent. They were happy. They were respected. They were home. Whatever the guild offered, it would have to be extraordinary to compete with that. The delegation ship entered Earth's solar system. The moment of truth was approaching. Humanity would listen to what the guild had to say. But whether humanity would return remained an open question. The answer would depend entirely on whether the guild had finally learned what humanity had always known. That true strength comes not from dominance, but from choosing when to walk away.